You're with Julian on the brown note. Bathed in sunlight, as it's the time of year when my show is in daylight due to the lightning in the evenings. Is Scott Morrison the world's most inept leader? Yes, he is. We've got plenty of evidence from his first forays as leader, where he tried to move the Australian embassy to Jerusalem to try and win a local by-election that he lost. It has been on clear display that he has terrible judgement, a very poor intellect, no ability to take ownership of anything he does, and he lives by the 24-hour news cycle. He is now out there making global fools of us. I don't know if you've seen the posters all around Glasgow where they're having the World's Climate Summit at the moment, where he's being greeted by massive placards rubbishing Australia. Remember, he's the guy that walked into Parliament holding a lump of coal. He is front and centre in this debacle. Now, he's managed to dominate this trip with his amazing submarine deal that he had forming AUKUS with Boris Johnson and, thank God, not Trump, but Joe Biden, where he ditched the French submarine deal via a text message or via them finding out in the public domain of media. A multi-billion-dollar deal that caused an enormous amount of consternation, and also managed to make mortal enemies out of China, who already hated him, and France as well, and much of Europe, who won't have a bar of us when it comes to trade negotiations. And now we found out shortly after his amazing submarine deal, which he got to stand on the world stage with flags and everything, that there may not be a submarine for 10 years after the French deal, or at all, and they will be outdated anyway. And as Emmanuel Macron, the French president, told our media in a very famous little soundbite the other day, we now have an 18-month review as to whether this will even happen. Scotty from announcing does it again. We're already under attack at this event for our being one of the world's biggest laggards on climate change. So there are posters going up, but there were posters in Times Square showing Scott Morrison's name and face and listing him as one of the developed world's enemies on action on climate change, which he wore as a badge proudly 10 years ago. When he was voting down our carbon tax, when he was bringing coal into Parliament, he was happy to wear that. But now it's not so trendy. Now, he arrived in a very difficult position in Glasgow, but that doesn't matter to someone as clever as Scott Morrison. He believes that he can bend any news cycle with sound bites, and he arrived there with some really watertight plans, which was he was going to bring up, for absolutely no reason, Facebook and social media and about how they were going to tackle it, because that's going to distract the world, Scott. That was one of his plans. His other one is so inept that it went under the radar. He actually tried to attack China again. He actually brought up about how it was essential to find the origin of the coronavirus, which is what kick-started the war with our biggest trade partner last year when he did that to try and back Team Trump. Not content, this time around, no one even listened to him because he was making so many stuff-ups that was so much more fun to focus on. And he wanted to water down any language on climate change that was critical to Australia, which is what they did recently with the Great Barrier Reef. The UNESCO were going to list it as an endangered World Heritage Site. And they travelled to 14 different countries to try and get people to vote not to say it was endangered. That's how these people govern. So he landed, and within 5 seconds he'd lost complete control of the narrative and has been pillared on global media ever since. First of all, the French President Macron came out and called him a liar to the world's media. When the Aussie press cornered Macron and said to him, "Do you think that Scott Morrison lied to you?" he uttered the immortal, glorious, "I don't think, I know." And that was wonderful. And then Joe Biden's come out and said something more cryptically, which is that he was under the impression that Australia had already cancelled the deal with the French and that they knew about it. And pundits are weighing up whether this means that his own staff are so incompetent they didn't tell him. Probably not. Or Scott Morrison let him believe that the French knew and didn't tell him. Now, what would a normal politician's reaction to this event of a foreign dignitary calling you a liar? Would probably try and get the diplomatic high ground. So what did Scott Morrison do? He released private text messages. He leaked private text messages from the French president to himself to try and get control of the 24-hour news cycle. And he couldn't even get that right. This is how dumb he is. He's released, not only was this an incredible, can you imagine if world leaders start releasing their personal communications with each other? He is the most short-sighted man on earth. He never sees 1 week down the road from his actions. He never saw what his actions against China would mean. He never saw what his actions on the submarine deal would mean a year from now. So he released this text message, or leaked it, saying, Macron messaged him, should I expect good or bad news for our joint submarine ambitions? To try and prove that he was in the right and that the submarine deal had been cancelled. But he couldn't even get that right. Should I expect denotes that you haven't told him, you moron. And this is your evidence to the world. You've literally proved that you didn't tell him because he's asking you. You would send something where he had actually got that information, not where he was asking you because he didn't know. Now we've got a very interesting political situation, and politics is something that someone needs to sit blunderbuss ScoMo down and explain to him. Angela Merkel's quitting as the leader of Germany. She was the most powerful person in Europe. America needs to have a very powerful relationship with Europe. Europe, China and America, the three biggest economic entities on Earth, are counter-related to each other and all need to have very good relationships. Emmanuel Macron is now the most important person in Europe. That's who Scott Morrison just pissed off. And Joe Biden is already making overtures to try and patch up the relationship with Macron over a submarine deal that may yield no submarines and be rejected in 18 months by a review process. That leaves us with one friend on the world stage, apart from the Prime Minister of India, who's apparently quite fond of Scott Morrison for some reason. That leaves us with Boris Johnson. The only other major pariah in the Anglosphere is the UK under Boris Johnson. They're now our friends. Europe hates them too. And Europe has no reason to support any trade deal that Australia makes with the UK. So they will want to attack the UK for the UK having Brexit, and they'll also now want to attack Australia for the submarine deal, because Macron will be the most powerful leader in Europe. And especially with Britain gone and with a new chancellor in Germany, he will be the number one top dog. Do you think that they're going to be offering us some favourable terms for trade after we've just lost our biggest trading partner in China? He's a blundering idiot. He blunders through things. No one has stopped this man his whole life. He's got to the top job in the land without anyone pulling him up for not having any capabilities of doing it. So he must believe, quite rightly so, that he is good enough. But unfortunately, he isn't. He has destroyed our relationships with two of the three biggest trade partners on Earth. And it doesn't matter which direction we're going in, America's not going to do anything for us. America's the one that has been picking up our slack with China, selling them more of all the stuff that China won't buy from us. And now we're entering into a phase where iron ore is crashing, and that has kept us solvent for so long because it went through the roof over the last couple of years. It is now receding massively, as is the building industry in China. This is a perfect embodiment of how stupid this man is. Why did Macron speak to our press in such a manner where he called Scott Morrison a liar? It was, believe it or not, most likely a self-inflicted wound. Macron was talking to dignitaries and the press at the summit in depth, in conversation, and blundering Scott Morrison steamed into the conversation, put his arm around him. I'll just read out what he did. Scott Morrison did a handshake lead to French President Emmanuel Macron. I love it when these things scroll backwards without you even asking them to. Did a handshake lead to French President Emmanuel Macron's explosive comments about the former Prime Minister of lying about a submarine deal? Talking to News.com, Dr. Romain, a historian at Flinders University, said the deterioration can partly be explained by an unexpected G20 run-in between Scott Morrison and Macron. The PN interrupted the president on Saturday when Macron was talking to a number of other people. Up until that point, the pair hadn't spoken publicly at the G20 summit. He was having a chat with someone. I just went up and I just put my arm on his shoulder and said, "Good day, Emmanuel," and look forward to catching up over the next couple of days, Mr. Morrison told reporters. And he was happy to exchange these greetings. The PM's official photographer, who he takes everywhere, he carries an official taxpayer-funded photographer to everywhere he goes. This is madness. Why isn't anyone pulling him up on this stuff? The PM's official photographer was there to capture the moment, and these photos were then dished out to journalists. Dr. Fatty conceded the world leaders are prone to bump into each other, but they're not on good day terms. It could have been a simple hello, but Mr. Morrison had the official photographer take a shot of him and the president in order to convey to the Australian public in one image that all is well with France. Dr. Fatty said that might have backfired, as Macron did not wish to see the Australian press being tricked in such a way. He took a very bold and unusual decision and went to address the Australian press directly and in English to set the record straight. So he has stumbled into Macron having a private conversation about different things, shoved his arm around him and said, "Good day, mate." And then, "Can I get a selfie?" Had his private photographer, well, personal photographer, not so much private seeing as we're paying for it, take a photo so he could show all of us in Australia that they were best buddies. And Macron's gone, "No way are you getting away with this," and called him a liar on the world stage. That's how inept he is, and that's why he is the world's most stupid, incompetent, blundering leader.